A very good evening to all of you. I, Akriti Kumari, on behalf of CII, would like to welcome everyone to the CII series of webinars on Industry 4.0 for India. The topic for today's session is Sustainability in Manufacturing with Industry 4.0. The session is brought to you by our partner, Amplo Global Incorporation. I would like to welcome our esteemed panelist for today's session, Mr. Anirban Bhattacharya, co-founder and board member, Amplo Global. Anirban has over 18 years of strategy, research and development and implementation experience in physical and digital operations manufacturing, supply chain process improvement, and process automation services. He is the founding member of Amplo Global, an AI-led Industry 4.0 risk management product company that powers Amplify 4.0. A platform that enables organizations to measure, assess, and define 3 to 5 years of Industry 4.0 execution readiness. He earned his engineering degree from Birla Institute of Technology and Science, India, in Electrical and Electronics, and an MBA from Fuqua School of Business at Duke University, where he specialized in strategy and marketing. Very warm welcome to all the participants joined us today. Before we begin with the session, I would request the participants to post their questions in the Q&A section. The questions will be taken up by our panelists one by one at the end. I would also request our panelists to kindly keep themselves on mute when not speaking. So without any further ado, let's begin with today's session. I would request Anirban to kindly begin the session. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Akriti. I would like to share my screen. So. Hopefully it is shared.
You can see it. You just put it on the presentation.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. So before we get into the agenda for manufacturing, let's try to connect an end-to-end storyline where we see how the transformation on the Industry 4.0, especially for manufacturing, is happening. So the first piece where all of us are trying to make a mark, manufacturing being in the middle of the entire value chain, how this cost center, as we all know that manufacturing is a cost center, how it could be converted into a profit center. And now that's a big, bold commitment that a senior leadership would make to the CEO of the organization. But believe me, as we are interacting with prospects, customers, this is happening. And this is, and the way it is happening is very unique. At its center is data. At its core, it's data. So the manufacturing shops are really making sure that they have good data, viable data. And now they are sharing across the value chain, which also enables the efficiency of the organization directly hitting the balance sheet. So that's one way of be a part of the profit center. But the manufacturing as an unit is also driving revenue in some cases by, let's say, sharing data with supplier, which they haven't done before. So they have redefined the boundaries of the relationship, the intellectual properties. So many ways things have come where manufacturing is sitting at the profit table. The second thing which we will talk about today is sustainability in manufacturing. Pretty fresh, pretty new maybe 3-4 years. People have really focused on this in the last 3-4 years. And I'm sure all of you are also a part of this journey, which we'll talk about. And I'm not sharing more on this because I have some meat and presentation for this. The third one is, how do you take and create an overall integrated business planning, which has a few components. One is, the new one is, of course, sustainability strategy and operations plan, asset management, which will become a part of IBP as well, all the assets you have. Then, of course, you have the legacy sales, operations, financial, procurement piece in the puzzle. And it has gone beyond sales and operations. It has gone to an integrated business planning because it's holistically planning the whole business for the next 3-4 years for the organization to come. That's a trend we are seeing in manufacturing, where manufacturing is coming in the IBP, where manufacturing is sitting on the table of IBP as an operations, has always been there. It's not that they're doing it new, but with a different lens. And those lenses we will be talking about that today. And one of the lenses that we'll talk about today, of course, is sustainability, which is the previous bar or the pillar. But why that enables the overall business planning, we'll also talk about that today. So that's kind of the storyline we have framed. So, so let's talk about the overall manufacturing value chain, as continuing from the previous slide. It's, if you see, we are calling it cognitive manufacturing. Manufacturing, which mainly consists of not only people, process, technology, but also machine. And machine being a part of the Industry 4.0 roadmap, as we are seeing that machines are slowly moving from schedule to cycle, which means the machine itself knows when to stop, when to run, and they have its own experience. They have their own experience. Their data are coming into the central location. Leaders are analyzing the machine health and allocating budget for the next 2-3 years to come. So the manufacturing has really become cognitive. Regulations is, I think, the most important thing right now you can embrace, where your safety, your compliance, everything matters, especially post-pandemic. It has taken really a hot seat. Supply chain optimization, we are also seeing how manufacturing is helping, because your optimization is no more just like the way we used to do optimization with heuristics. We are doing optimization with data, with artificial intelligence, and manufacturing's data. It's a part of that optimization of supply chain. And I think most of the trading partners and itself the organizations are all adapting new technologies. Most of the technologies that are in place, like drones, like of course the whole industrial IoT is in place now. And as the organizations are maturing, as the country's infrastructure is supporting, these organizations are also moving towards enabling these technologies. I think they are no more emerging anymore. They are actually or enablers. And I mean, the most important piece, though we have embraced some sort of digitization, digital enablement, human intervention and human experience, it has to be there. Things have changed, of course. Maybe instead of 6, we will have 2 resources in a line balancing, but those 2 resources are so skilled, so connected, that the due date of the customer demand is not getting impacted as organizations are optimizing from 6 resources to 2, enabling the 2 resources with full-fledged technology, and the remaining 4, they're rescaling for placing them in other jobs. It's happening as we speak. All in all, it just helps you in market reputation, market branding, and the branding of the market of the organization is also changing, because now if you're not on the value chain center table, then that organization is losing its mark, its ground. You have to be in that whole value chain to be for the entire value chain. And I was going to talk about blockchain, but I'm not talking about that for now. But this whole value chain, how in fact blockchain as an enablement, as an enabler, how it has brought all these organizations together is also very important. So the spine, which is lateral going from left to right, which we call data modernization, is extremely critical, and it has to have its reusable component. And at the bottom, when we see continuous improvement, I think we are doing this from the last many years. There is the fundamentals of running that business hasn't changed. What has changed is how you experience it, how the integration is happening, how we are doing like simulations even before we launch a program. Can I run a complete consumption model as a service model for my customer? Organizations who are really supporting multiple industry verticals, let's say like Ericsson or like various of this Schneider Electric, all these organizations, as they are supporting various industry verticals, sell to their end customer, they have completely like embraced these as a service concept. So that's where also manufacturing, I'm going to token a word right now, manufacturing as a service is also coming into play. And that's where one element has to be checked is sustainability. So how sustainable the manufacturing is, that I will outsource my manufacturing. Of course, the high-tech industry has already done it, but not only outsource the manufacturing, but it will run as a service. And that enablement, that end goal enablement will only happen when one of the big boxes of sustainability is checked correctly, where regulations come into play. So now we have a poll question coming up. So I would like all of you to try to give your response. It should be on your screen. I think the time is over. Should we see the result as well, Akriti?
We have 45 seconds here.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Do see the result. So, okay. So almost there are some people here who have started. Of course, it's a mix of all the three bullet points, but there is also a good amount of, like, actually more than 50% where the adoption hasn't happened yet. So I think this is the time that we should consider this, I would say, seriously, to make sure that not only the adoption, but start something around small, which we call prototype, and see, even in isolation, see where we stand. But this result that I'm seeing in my screen right now is interesting and timely, because some folks who haven't adopted, they actually can skip. I mean, I'm not saying to skip any steps, but take the leap towards the most recent version of Industry 4.0, I will say that way, which has a sustainability component in the mix. So from an Industry 4.0 perspective, which entails your connected product, connected operations, connected data, connected experience. These four pillars on the Industry 4.0 and the principles of Industry 4.0 about the connectedness um, is why it is not Industry 3.0 and 4.0, because in 3.0 we have so much SCADA systems and all the ISA 95 modeling were coming up, but the overall connectedness and the experience flavor has come in Industry 4.0 in the fourth revolution. And now this whole sustainability and sustainable manufacturing coming into play, I think people who haven't started can actually include sustainability as a part of Industry 4.0 roadmap as well. It's not that it's a heavy syllabus to start with. It is something to start from very basics of Industry 4.0, and we'll talk about this, and choose one of these and start considering sustainability in manufacturing. And I think we will explain with an use case as well, where you can start taking that leap towards sustainable or sustainability in the Industry 4.0. So a great mix of results there. So let's talk about some of the technologies that we are seeing that's coming through. Of course, one of them is cloud. Definitely big push in supply chain and manufacturing to move their legacy data into cloud. Some organizations are very comfortable, some organizations are not. How do you move that needle? That's a big piece of the puzzle. Of course, that entails the industrial IoT. Cybersecurity is a big piece. I'm going to pick one more, and I can take more questions if you have any folks have any questions. The other bullets. So augmented reality is a big piece now. Also, a lot of organizations who are embracing augmented reality for knowledge management areas, where suppose you have a return and you need to know why the product has been returned, and you need to go back to manufacturing, figure out the lot number, and how the whole augmentation of knowledge search, knowledge management, really helping the manufacturing belt is just unbelievable. And subcontinent has started embracing that as well, as we speak to them almost every week. So the scope has four components. Of course, manufacturing technologies, pretty, I would say, legacy, prime. We have a lot of advancement in technologies in the last 40 years, 20 years, 30 years. Product life cycles is a very important scope. As I mentioned about the return example, I purposely chose that to connect back. When the product is manufactured, it goes to the field, it comes back with something, some data, some returns, some refurbishment, and how it connects back to improve the manufacturing. The whole circularity of the product life cycle is a very key concept and scope for your starting some prototype. If, as I see the result in the previous screen, you can really start on those mindshare as well. How product life cycle management is really playing a big role in sustainability, manufacturing, and Industry 4.0. I mean, three big topics by its own. Value creation networks. I touched upon this topic a little bit. So it's how do you share your intellectual property with your key suppliers or key trading partners or distributors, and you bring the entire network into that sustainability scale. So of course, if you in your own house do a good job in green manufacturing or fresh, clean manufacturing, which includes various pillars, not only just cleaning it, it's the, I will talk about that a little bit too, is about how do you um, how do you create that value in the across the supply chain. That's a scope that you should consider. And maybe if individually, if you can start with a supplier risk analysis, which supplier will fail, which supplier will not fail, those kinds of analysis, which supplier are more sustainable than others. So there's a value metrics that we bring to the table. and that those could be measured. So global manufacturing impacts as well. Of course, climate change is a big topic, as we all know, but the global manufacturing has shifted its needle after pandemic. So a lot of manufacturing is moving from countries we know to the new countries, and it's a fresh start for the newer countries. But as I mentioned, that if you are a little late, it's better late than never. And if you're late, you'll be the seventh or eighth mover when you pick up the best, learning from the others. So that's where global manufacturing impact is happening on the newer countries. I think they're doing a much better job than the legacy countries. Sustainable manufacturing, or manufacturing as sustainability, I'm using that term synonymously. One of the factors that I would pick here is the human factor. Human factor is very essential. I mean, I don't know to use a negative word, but I will use it. So, like the retrenchment or the resource reallocation, maybe the right word, is is a big topic right now. How do you reskill it? How do you basically optimize your flow at the same time? Only focus on exception-based supply chain. The whole demand-driven supply chain is coming in place again and again in the last many years, but now it has a strong human factor into it. So that's where your elements of sustainability, best practices, because as you're more sustainable, as your things are more repeatable, more scalable, you need less human interaction, and you can focus in reskilling and only the red zones of the process. And also, embracing smart factory is also a step towards sustainability. Why? Because as you embrace a smart factory, you are digitizing it. As you're digitizing it, you have more data. As you have more data, you can analyze it, you can predict it, and then, of course, ultimately, you can prioritize it correctly in your roadmap, in your scoping, in your modeling for the next 2-3 years of programs, and that is an important part towards sustainable manufacturing. Uh, Dynamics modeling is the outcome of the first three inputs, and how do we take the overall environmental, social, and the governance of impact of sustainability, that every time I'm manufacturing something, it's actually polluting the air. It's actually may have an effect on the health and safety of the workers. From basics to very advanced concepts, is it really having an economical dimension? I talked about circularity, how organizations are really making sure that we use water lesser and more less in the next 2-3 years. And most of the, let's say, the retail companies that we speak to, we work with on the, let's say, a jeans manufacturing company, how they are really embracing that smart wardrobe or smart closet concept is something, is an eye opener for all of us. And especially leveraging technologies like this, what happens, the enablement is happening in 3 or 4 ways. One is, of course, you're getting connected. And as you get connected, you connect data. And as you connect data, you can actually know how you would report back to, because ultimately you have to focus on these matrices and reports to get back to the government, to your organization, to really claim what we are saying. So that's where the I will pick on ESG reporting, which I was mentioning a couple of seconds back, is that's a big piece to manufacturing now. Manufacturing is embracing the best practices of ESG, and the direct and the indirect effect of all these dimensions are being considered. But that all can happen in manufacturing once you have the scope correct, once you are embracing the 4.0 principles, and also you're embracing some technologies. I think most of the organizations are. Some organizations are really getting into some advanced technologies as robots and others too. But this is something that, to create that dynamic environment or a more smarter, sustainable environment, these technologies are very important to embrace. But also, you have to have a crawl and walk and run philosophy in mind. You can't do everything all together. Then where we would start, maybe somewhere where you do a good ranking, good scoring, good understanding of your roadmap, and then one or two programs, and fail fast, succeed fast. And that's something we are also seeing in the market. So there's no issue in failing. It's just that you're learning a lot from it. We have another poll question coming up, so we'll respond that um, in the next couple of minutes. So have you started your sustainability journey as an organization? So that's the question. And please respond to this. I think we can see the results.
No, we just have 10 seconds. 5, rather.
Okay, I do see the results. So, um, so the difference between the last question and this question, which I guessed, the last question has more of the readiness than this one. So we have uh, we have less than, I would say, 50% who haven't even adopted sustainability in the journey. But as I said, that it's a one step ahead. And even if you haven't started Industry 4.0 journey or some digitization, if I use that word synonymously, it's time to involve sustainability in the mix. And as I explain the next chart, I will keep this response in mind. And the also the good part is that I'm seeing in the result that lot many have already started. Actually, that's a very good thing. But most of the population hasn't adopted. But I think it's a mixed result. And the previous response has a higher percentage of adoption than this one, so which is expected. So let me keep this response in mind when I'm speaking to the next slide. Is how do I take and enable manufacturing? And first of all, I was thinking to build a slide. Then finally, I wanted to just show everything together, just see the ecosystem of manufacturing. So if you start from the top left, which is we start from, let's say, top left of design and continuous engineering. There's a transaction systems of records, which is, I think it's very mature right now. Most of the organizations will have some sort of, I would say, reactionary resource planning and transactional system. So the enterprise resource planning systems are there. So this is not new. But this transactional record is so important that it has set the stage for optimization for the last 20, 30 years, mainly heuristics. And now that optimization is now demanding artificial intelligence and machine learning on top of it. So there's a difference on how these transactional data are being leveraged. The second piece is, and why it is sustainable, and I will also connect that. The second piece is the analytic systems. I think there's a lot of people are working into this, but how to really connect and get value from that data and you predict. I don't think it's a very normal thing in the ecosystem. It's still, the analytics are there, but I think the predictive nature of the analytics is a new normal. And then, of course, if you really see the edge understanding, where you have machines and edge and then manufacturing systems going up to factory systems and then going to the main organizational reporting, which we all know this, we call it ISA 95 model. The horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal is supplier, organization, distributor. Vertical is within the organization where you vertically integrate, the ISO 95 model integration. It's becoming real time now. So some of the data that are coming on the edge are being analyzed then and there, and it's not even coming to the manufacturing execution systems at all. So that is a culture shift. Dynamic scheduling is very, very critical. One of them is your, of course, machines moving from schedule based, every Saturday it runs, to a cycle based, after every 250 run, I will stop myself. That's a big piece. Monitoring and evaluation is very, very important, which is there, but now it is completely predictive. Now, how this circle really helps in the sustainability. So we will take one use case and we will talk about a similar concept that we have established in the previous chart. So let's talk about the entire manufacturing floor of a car, automotive manufacturing. It's a tier one supplier, to be very honest, the work we had done. And but we will take the entire supplier relationship back to the product going out. So one big piece of the previous chart, okay, where this connected nets we wanted to create, we can apply to each of this process elements out here. So the first piece that we talk about is the decomposition of the waste disposal process. So whenever you are trying to see where the gaps are and decrease your CO2 emission plan, you need a good connected system. So when we were talking about transactional records, when we're talking about the predictiveness of the manufacturing analytics, when we're talking about the edge analytics or edge run, edge is something on the machine, you're making some decisions. That's edge. This is where you will collect the data. It's not that you'll not collect data from other places, but that's a core data that comes in. And then you would do some kind of prototyping to understand that. We generally call it design thinking, but various ways, it's the most efficient way, but there's some lesser efficient ways also you can do it, but it's the most efficient way to do it. The second piece, when the inspections and the inbounds are happening, you would measure and score the supplier even before you can do that. That's where your continuous engineering would come into play, because if you want to bring some suppliers, we generally call business development operation, biz DevOps. That's a lingo sometimes we use, DevOps. It's a great agile concept, DevOps. I'm sure you're aware of this. So we measure and score the footprint. Okay, so that's how the connectedness of the data are so critical. Unless and until technologies are enabled, you would not be able to do it efficiently. So they're all like non-linearity is being created. Why non-linearity? You have to have technology, you have to have data to collect it, you have to have a repository, maybe cloud or some legacy system to collect it, and then you have to run these reports, which you have to report back to the government as well as to your organization. So every time these kinds of steps are happening, there is a point where we are always doing a total quality management also. So the total quality management is helping you. Total quality management, as we define, and we all know the definition from the Toyota definition, is about the design quality, the process quality, the product quality, the product that's going out, and the asset quality. Four qualities we have to check. Then only your total quality management would be having a satisfying result. Another piece that is very important to track is the chemicals, health, safety, hazardness on the shop floor. These are also a big measure. And I'm talking about a discrete manufacturing here. Of course, from a process manufacturing, the similar elements are there to measure, but it's a little different. And I can take some questions as well if needed. That is a big piece. What we call OSHA, right? Operational Health and Safety Association that we work with. That's something that's very, very important. At every time when the assembly and the assembly is happening, the measure of the emissions, any kind of emissions, from carbon to greenhouse gas, any measure that we are measuring, it's very, very important to it's very important to know that, okay, not only from a worker safety perspective, like if it runs in the test run, what kind of because every vehicle coming out, it has to be tested. Even when that's happening, how do I measure that they are within the limit, total limit, like within the limit, which is industry accepted limits, and also how can we do better from our competition? And then when it runs on the road for the next 5 years to 10 years, how do I make sure that I can collect enough data to make this vehicle healthy? That's where your connectedness comes into play. Industry 4.0 comes into play. All these things are coming into play. So at the end of the day, waste, freshwater withdrawal, carbon footprint, your chemicals measures, all these are so critical. And believe me, we have this in the last many years, but the way we are being more aware to deliver a manufacturing shop floor, which is not only digitized, but also it's enabled with 4.0 connectedness. Okay, and now it has to be sustainable, and then only you are a good manufacturing company. It's not easy to achieve. It's not easy at all. So, but how do we plan this out to have this plant to be more sustainable around the area, is something where our recommendations are. It's just that how you plan out a crawl, walk, run philosophy. Now, if you connect the previous slide with all those systems, each of those systems are playing a role in this life cycle. We talked about dynamic scheduling. So how that is influencing, which is a part of manufacturing, but how it's influencing a sustainable manufacturing is also important. That if I do a machine health in a better way, not force it to always perform and allow it to take a cycle-based routine stop, but still you need to maintain the end customer demand due date or end distribution requirements due date, where your DRP distribution requirement planning has asked you to deliver. So all those can be maintained. At the same time, how do we bring that dynamic scheduling? That's where your heuristics-led optimization or AI-led optimization comes into play. Okay? That's where you will be optimizing all these 7, 8 parameters or 30 parameters or 2 parameters, how you would call it. So I will take some questions, of course, if you have any questions. But before we open up for the questions, something where we see from our side, this is Amplify 4.0 is our trademark product, where we do all these simulations. And we create some gamified models. That's actually what we do, mainly for sustainability, supply chain, and channel strategy. That's our sweet spots are as a boutique organization. Enabling capability is very critical. And as we have more standardization and postponement, your modelings are strong. Enabling change is also very important. And how you drive outside the 4 walls. Within the 4 walls is still you will do some way because they are your employees or workers or unions. How do you measure? How do you measure them? How do you treat them as all on you? But the biggest mindset game is how do you bring even union workers, right? If they're coming from an outside, how do you work with them? How do you create a gamified leadership model? These are all very important. And last but not the least is about the technology and how do you bring those sustainable best practices in the quality management process is also very, very important. So I would love to take more questions. It's impossible to do justice in 45 or 40 minutes or 45 minutes to really lay out a plan of a sustainable plus digital plus all the elements of 4.0 manufacturing. But hopefully I've given you some insights. I would love to pick some questions, Akriti, if you see some questions coming along.
Thank you, Anirban. It was such an insightful session. So we have means not a question, it's a statement. I think someone is from Mr. Ankit Jan. He is. Can you hear me, Anirban?
Yes, I can hear you. Absolutely, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. So he has written that means I don't know what he's trying to ask is emphasis on predictive quality. So I think he's asking about do we have to put emphasis on a predictive quality? Or Ankit, if you are there, I can unmute you and you can explain your question.
Okay, that is.
Give me a moment.
I can take this actually. I can take this question. So quality. I think I talked about the 4 pillars of quality: the design, the process, the asset, and the product. So design is the design of manufacturing, of course, legacy concept, process, harmonization, optimization to make the product. Asset quality is the machines who are manufacturing the product, and the product quality itself. If you take each of these 4 pillars, how do you predict? Prediction is, in lack of better terms, early warnings. Now, how early is also important. For supply chain, I think people are figuring that out very well with a concept called control tower. Has been there for last many years with the air traffic control now, and now supply chain resilience programs are embracing it. Manufacturing control tower is a big step towards predictive quality. Let's instill that concept today. And it's not I'm just inventing something. People I know some organizations that we are speaking to, we have delivered work successfully. They are into that manufacturing lean control tower, which means that I'm going to predict enough warnings and I will respond to those warnings based on my availability of my resources, based on the demand due of the customer, based on my balance sheet demand, right? So that's where predictive quality warning that, okay, let's say I have a machine and the machine has to fail, how it will fail, when it will fail. Let's take an example of that. Let's say the same vehicle manufacturing example. Let's double click on a bus company. Let's say Mumbai Transport Authority has 1,000 buses. And these 1,000 buses have machines built by, if you are one of them from the company, let's say Cummins. And the bus logistics manager says that I need to know how I would optimize my route. So it's a simple question. So there are 15 buses which will fail early. There are 15 buses which are brand new. There are 15 buses which are moderately mature but would not fail in the next 7 days. So how do you analyze this predictive quality from a route optimization back to manufacturing? And as we are in an environment of climate change, it is also very important to get those factors into it. So now how this whole route optimization will be the best output, what a manufacturing personnel will do with this. The reason why manufacturing personnel is interested to get this field data, because that's how the attribution of the data they will categorize. They will learn this well, they will read this learning data, machine learning they will do, and they would say, okay, based on the 7 attributes, these 2 we should consider. And that's how the field, the blade movement should happen inside the engine. So they have a newer version of manufacturing or an engineering bill of material. So now I think the question coming up is, even to implement this concept of sustainability in manufacturing or helping with predictive quality, let's mix all these in a bag, okay? So you have predictive quality coming in. Let's stick to the same example I was giving on this route optimization back to manufacturing floor. Let's take climate conditions, like how robust that machine would be, what's the temperature control, and everything should happen, and how sustainable it is, carbon emission, green gas emission, all these concepts. So I think the first step of implementing that concept is how ready you are as an organization to create a, I'm going to say this term, Poka Yoki, which means that error proof. Because the human mindset is, if I'm not told to do, I will do something that I have done for the last 40 years. That's a human mindset. That is the first hit you have to make. That, okay, when we are manufacturing, the same example that I gave on the whole manufacturing example, that whole floor can only record, if I go back to this, allow me to go back to that particular slide, this whole, what is the prerequisite of to enable sustainability concepts here? First is there has to be an error-proof data entry system. Let's go to the basics. If you're not bringing that error-proof Poka Yoki system, the operators on the floor would not follow that. And if they don't follow that, the basic data need to run ESG is missing. The first step to this puzzle is, how do you create a Poka Yoki system? How do you create it? I have a simple answer. You start with design thinking. You do personification. Okay, if I'm an operator on September in a hot summer or a fall or an autumn coming in, I will not be interested to get in close to that hot furnace just to enter a few data. I'm just making it up right now in the meeting. Okay, then how do I enter that data? So that whole Poka Yoki system is the first prereq for your journey towards Industry 4.0. Of course, that includes digitization and creating a sustainable floor. How do I know the leadership board will do right if I don't do the basics correct? It's not possible. So the prereq is do basics brilliantly. If you don't do basics brilliantly, you can't go to the advancement of your manufacturing, and you can't go to the next step of Industry 4.0. So the first step is take a pause, look into that all the basics you have, are you doing brilliantly? Brilliantly doesn't mean perfection. You don't have to be perfect. Just achieve that brilliant slash excellent data point, which will be set by your organization. And that's a business strategy that you have to do before doing this operations and IT strategy here. And you will be able to create the first step towards sustainability. Do basics brilliantly. Create a Poka Yoki system. How do you do that? You do a personification, relook into your supply chain in your manufacturing, and start from the basics. Take 2-3 inventory points and start with that. That would be my answer.
Anirban, we have one more question. One more question from Mr. Rajkumar. He's asking, how do we define KPIs while ensuring end-to-end sustainable manufacturing?
So, can you please read the question one more time? I just want to rehear it.
Sure. It's how do we define KPIs while ensuring end-to-end sustainable manufacturing?
I mean, of course, KPI definition, I can't preach there because we all know balance scorecarding and how do you supplier scorecarding. So KPI definitions are pretty standard, right? Inventory turns and OSHA safety analysis. I'm not getting into that definition, but how, as you're asking, and I also see one more question. I will also answer that. The whole how part will only come into play when you know how bad or good at a inventory point or a point you are in. How do you know that you have excess inventory? Let's pick this up. Very simple, last 100 years of concept. How do you know you have excess inventory? How do you know that you have buffer? Because your numerator and denominator need to be defined correctly. And the how part is you will only know those numerators and denominators when you know what to measure. What to measure. How do you know what to measure and then create the formula? Because that's where you take the entire manufacturing processes and you understand the fat inside that process. So once you know that, okay, these are my 54% of my manufacturing process has fat, but out of that 54%, I will only focus on 17%. Those fats are really bad. It can cause a heart attack. But analysis you have to do because you know the definitions of the KPIs. We all know that. That's not an issue. But to get that to the cost factor of the process where the fat lies, and that's the measure I will measure in the next 90 days, that's where the magic is. And an organization, as it does better, it has tools or mechanisms, or let's use a word, prediction, right? So it's something that where your predictability will help you to define the KPIs. I will take some other questions. I think there was a question before this question. Let me take that one, Kriti. I think there's a question on chemical high hazards of chemical industries.
Yes,
Let's take that question. And then I will take the next question I see on the right side also. So chemical industry is a process manufacturing industry, and continuous manufacturing is what it is. And you have when you're starting the manufacturing, I'm pitching this person, of course, you don't know what product will come out because it's a continuous. So you plan for A, B comes out. Now, how do you predict that? And how do you make sure that you enable a continuous manufacturing, connected manufacturing, sustainable manufacturing? So what we are seeing in some of these continuous manufacturing processes, as organizations are, believe me, organizations are moving from 4G to 5G, we are seeing that um, there are certain checkpoints, because you have a recipe where you put in the flow, you're putting materials, and we need to decide on that recipe which one I will check by entering, let's say, an iron rod to collect a sample and go to the lab while the manufacturing is happening, because you can't stop it. So there are two elements happening in this industry 4.0-ness. I'm making this word, right? How do you make it more 4.0? Is either I have the appetite to react from lab to that manufacturing process in that lead time, or I improve in the next run, because the results will be not so fast. That has happened in the hazardous areas, in the chemical manufacturing areas, paint manufacturing. Like, I talked to a pretty senior leader in AkzoNobel. I had a chat a couple of weeks back. Very similar question was asked to me, that is our platform, we do have a platform that we do the simulation, really helps in this. And this was, I was explaining that few things, the reason why we are on the universe, on Earth, is because of that. Otherwise, all humans, we would have moved to Mars and everything would be automated. The reason why human entry is important is that figuring out that should I bring that data from lab into that continuous manufacturing real time or not is something of 4.0-ness is important. So where I'm going with this answer is very different than discrete, very different. And that relationship, getting that element, at that, when half of the manufacturing is done, you know that I will kind of predict, is the product A coming out, or actually B, C, or D coming out? And then I have to change my plan, and I have to change my changeover, and I have to change my dynamic scheduling because of that. Is where the smartness of the organization is. You take from juice manufacturing to chemical manufacturing to paint manufacturing. That's the real timeness is a challenge in continuous. That's one of the reasons you would see that uh, automotive industry has really done well, because the discrete space. But also, I mean, if you really see any other process manufacturing or continuous manufacturing companies, they have also done well. But I think discrete is a little ahead than process manufacturing. I'll take the next question. Has anyone conducted an adequate audit for the policymakers, as if the units go on changing, the destination goes for a toss? So this is a much more ESG conversation we should have, that what great would look like, what good would look like for an industry sector or a sub vertical under that sector. um, uh, can I take a version that was released in 2019 and still claim ourselves as sustainable company, and the government really gives me tax benefits, for the lack of better words? That, I mean, audit is an issue. And how, if you really see the control board that has happened in the subcontinent, in India, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, there is an independent board who decides, especially in Singapore, where you have to qualify for, even to say that I'm participating in sustainable manufacturing, and to qualify for it. Now, who's doing the audit for this? How do you know that qualification is right for that organization? Um, it is um, that 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 factors, or I would say the measures, that okay, this industry sector, this vertical will actually has to qualify for 93 percentile of gas emission, then only we will call it a sustainable manufacturing floor. that's completely controlled by the board. And I do believe audit happens, by the way. And I do believe, and that's where how a digital country, right, and if I may say a digital India, right, will come into play to create a continuous process improvement. Because this is all circular, this is all cyclical. This is all not cyclical, I mean circular is the right word. It's all connected. It's a circle. Because audit cannot happen independently without the manufacturing bodies, because we all have to approve as a group. Then the country has a plan to be green, and company has a plan to be green in the next 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. How do you take that? So I think audit happens, and audit it should happen, and it should be a DNA. And even this whole audit thing is so critical for Industry 4.0 also, is like as you manufacture things, you have to audit yourself. That is something will be very essential. And what you're auditing? You're auditing your plan versus actual. You're measuring your risk. So if that is there, you are ready for the external audit as well. So, but the external audits are not in our control, right? It's mainly coming from the board. So that's what it is. So I will just leave it there for now, Akriti. If you have no more, or if you have more questions, I can take as well.
So Anirban, just last one. We have a couple of questions on. They wanted to know your views on sustainability manufacturing in the Indian context. Means where it's right now in India, how.
I think the whole contextualization that I am providing. I don't think India is that behind, by the way. I feel very proud to say that.
Seeing the poll also, we got to know.
It also depends on at what level or what sectors we are talking about. I understand, Akriti, where you're coming from. It is what we are seeing, and this is definitely a good outcome that we are seeing, that the government also is pushing a lot for a 2030 plan. And there's a saying that, hopefully that's being correctly done and executed in India. If there is a push from the base, from the core, half of the job is done. The remaining half is depending on the organizations embracing it. But the biggest challenge in India is infrastructure of not only the manufacturing floor, but overall supply chain, distribution. Let's say we are talking to an alcoholic beverage company a year and a half back about a very similar sustainability and manufacturing and supply chain, when they're talking about can we do this in India if there's a logistics demand in the alcoholic beverage regulatory compliance. Can this be met in India? And we saw that India itself has its own categorization than any other countries. So I think the awareness is there. Okay, first of all, where India is a big awareness. Second is government is pushing for it. Third is we are all stepping towards data-led manufacturing. The last step that we all have to take, the percentages which Akriti you're referring to, is to start really doing some prototypes. Because this year we can't move the needle to implement everything. Next year we can't. Then what's the plan for 2023 or 2024? To achieve that plan, we now need to start some prototyping. So India is at a point where we are seeing, we means Amplo Global is having conversations where some conversations are really mature. That's a very less percentage, of course, less than 10. But 40%, I would say they have decided, 50% hasn't. So I actually diverge the percentage as well, right? That's the way we see. 10% or below really doing well, 40% really have started the journey, and 50% hasn't even started, purely in sustainability. Okay. So, but if you really see, you will really be surprised to see certain things in India, which you would go to, let's say, any other country, you would not see it, right? So Even the plastics thing, I think India has done well, but they have to do much better. So no, we are. I think maturity-wise, we are much lower right now in sustainability, because you have a two-step before sustainability. You have to be like connected industry 4.0, and second, you need to have a good technology in place. Those two should coexist to have the sustainability to really take off. But those are not dependent directly. I mean, it's a cultural shift of the organization also. So, but all these come together. That would be my answer. And I think I shared the percentage as well, which we're seeing every day.
Yes. Yeah, I totally get your point. So Anban, we would close it for now, as we don't have any other questions.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
I would thank you very much for this insightful session. And I would also like to thank all our participants who have joined us today. And I would request the participants that I have put my email ID on the chat. If anyone wants to connect to Mr. Bhattacharya or Amplo Global, they can write back to me. I will be very happy to connect you with the company. So thank you, Anirban. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.